Before we begin this webinar, I would like to introduce myself and our presenter. My name is Christina Alchamisi, and I work as a lawyer at Legal Aid New South Wales with the Community Legal Education team. I'm joined today by Janine Young, the Energy and Water Ombudsman for New South Wales. Hi, Janine. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Christina. Lovely to be here.
It's our pleasure. So we'll now like to get into the webinar content. So Janine, please take it away.
Okay, good morning everybody and lovely to join you. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, and of course we're meeting on different lands from wherever we're coming from. I'm currently on Gadigal land and therefore I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Gadigal land and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge all the Aboriginal people and communities that welcome EWON onto their lands and where we work across the course of a year. It really is a fabulous part of our work. Thank you. Okay, what's EWON? The Energy and Water Ombudsman New South Wales was established in 1999. I think I've got the year right. We celebrated our 21st anniversary last year, so 22 years this year. We're there for all electricity and gas customers right across New South Wales and some water customers. So mainly for water, it includes the customers of Hunter Water and also Sydney Water, Shoalhaven down on the south coast, Essential Water, which is in Broken Hill, plus also some small water providers that provide water within small embedded networks, so little groups of residents and some businesses. If a customer's not been able to resolve a dispute with their supplier, then we can help them resolve their complaint. But we also offer free, fair and independent advice at all points in time, so a customer can come to us if they need any assistance whatsoever. As Christina mentioned before, you might have questions actually as we progress through the presentation, and I'm happy for those to be raised with me. I'm joined today by Narelle from my office, who you can't see, but she's working very hard behind the scenes, and she'll provide me with a nudge when we get some questions. So please raise anything. I'd prefer this much to be a conversation rather than me just reading from slides. So we consider and investigate complaints, and they come to us from a range of sources. Firstly, community workers and advocates. We have great partnerships and we hear from new and existing ones continually through our working days. Many energy and water customers come to us directly, and in 2019-20 we heard from about 19,500 customers that experienced some issue, mostly with electricity, about 80%, 15% with gas and about 5% with water. Small businesses also come to us for help. Unfortunately, we don't hear from enough small businesses as they are not as aware that we're here for them. We certainly include them in our outreach and engagement programs, but we're particularly focusing on all of our virtual outreach on trying to engage small businesses, given COVID-19 presents some very challenging affordability and financial circumstances for them. So providers within EWON's jurisdiction, I talked a little bit about water before, but to explain it more broadly, all authorised electricity and gas providers operating in New South Wales. When I talk about authorised, the Australian Energy Regulator actually provides authorisations for people to either network energy, not that there's many applications from those, it's pretty much set in stone that Essential Energy, Endeavour Energy and Ausgrid are the network providers. But on the retail side, any entity that wants to market to the mass market, they need to get an authorisation from the Australian Energy Regulator, and there's about 35 or 36 of those at the moment. The common ones that you'd be very aware of are Energy Australia, Origin Energy, AGL, Red Energy, Simply Energy, but as I said, there's 35, so there's a whole lot of small entities in there as well. The networks, I mentioned the electricity ones. Gemini is the gas distribution operator for Sydney and the gas network, which extends beyond the metropolitan area as well. From July 2018, we expanded our jurisdiction, and any entity supplying or selling electricity or gas through an embedded network and which has obtained an exemption from being an authorised energy retailer or network company also has to be a member of EWON. So these are most common in residential parks, in large apartment buildings and in retirement villages. And it's where there is just one entity that is selling, and most often the owner's corporate is the network provider. So for many years, under New South Wales legislation, the residents in those different types of housing arrangements could come to EWON if they had a complaint. But because their energy retailer or network wasn't a member of EWON, we couldn't actually fully investigate or come to a fair and reasonable negotiated outcome. Well, from July 18, that changed. The Australian Energy Regulator changed the guidelines for exemption holders, and we're gradually bringing them into membership. So it's a gradual process. We currently have about 250 members, but it will get up to somewhere around 350, 400. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, water providers are required to become members, the larger ones which you know, but also the smaller ones that through IPART operate under the Water Industry Competition Act. And once again, they're in embedded networks. So you can see a full list of all of our members on our website, and it's growing and growing. So what do customers complain about? Easily summarised, 60% of complaints are about billing, 20% or thereabouts are about credit, about 10% are about customer service, and then we've got others that fall into different categories. But to break that down a bit further, when I say complaints about billing, it's usually disputing the amount of the bill. It might be because I have an estimated bill, in which case the meter hasn't been read, but the network company has estimated the usage for the quarter. It might be because a customer presents to us and they haven't been able to pay past accounts, and they've got quite an accumulation of arrears, and they're coming to assistance because they want to get an affordable payment arrangement. The next end, if people haven't been able to do that, is that they might have a disconnection warning notice, or they might already have been disconnected from electricity or gas, or restricted from water, and they come to us for assistance to be able to get the water fully turned on again, power and gas connected, and then be able to establish payment plans and things like that. Some customers will come to us with connection or transfer issues because they've actually tried to move from one retailer to another and it hasn't quite worked, or otherwise they've moved properties, and even though they set up an arrangement, they find when they arrive there that the power's not on. Other customers might come to us complaining about marketing. So it might have been door to door, or that's not as rampant as what it used to be, or it might be phone sales or another channel. Some customers come to us because they've got poor quality of supply, suffering outages, voltage variations. Some might have put on solar, they can't get a meter installed, or otherwise they're not getting feed-in tariffs. Some, it's just purely a matter of customer service. They've tried to get something quite simple fixed and it hasn't happened, and therefore they're reaching out for us to be able to address that matter and the root cause of why they originally called their energy or water company. And the final ones are about network supply and connection. These might be following storms and outages, or it might just be because there's been a local outage and they've been off power for some time. So it's quite a varied range of issues that customers come to us. The ones that take the longer time to resolve, though, are really around those disconnection, the affordability type issues. So the top complaint issues in 2019-20, as I mentioned, so billing around about 12,000, customer service around about 6,000, credit issues around about nearly 4,000. So 59% of complaints are received via phone. The balance of those are received either via our complaint form on our website or actually via email. We still get a few pieces of snail mail each week, generally from older consumers. I always read those. It really provides a bit of a window to what's going on in the broader world, I guess. 93% of our complaints we resolve within 30 days. Many of those are because customers haven't yet spoken to their energy or water provider, and after providing advice and information, we refer them back there, and most of those are resolved via the provider in that way. Some of them, though, come back to us because the customer's not satisfied with what was offered. Interestingly, during the COVID period, we're actually seeing the share of complaints that come in via phone and come in via web form is about 50-50. So people are obviously working a little bit differently now that they're working from home or in mixed arrangements of office and home-based working. So I'll talk a bit about the guiding principles that actually lead us to resolving complaints. So the purpose of our investigations is to establish, as far as practicable, the factual circumstances of the complaint. So we're not as much evidence-based. I mean, we are seeking evidence, but not from a court definition perspective. But it's really to gather that information to indicate to us what has gone on. We aim to achieve an agreed, fair and reasonable outcome. We have regard to all relevant laws, codes and regulations, and also good industry practice. So the agreed part is that we expect in some circumstances both parties, the customer and the energy provider, water provider, to perhaps conciliate or to actually adjust their expectations in light of the other party's position. We expect more, I guess, from the providers, given that they are businesses and that they need to focus on good customer service. In accordance with laws, codes and regulations, where we have high regard to all the energy and water different codes, the national energy rules, legislation, all those sorts of things. But we also have regard to the Australian consumer law, you know, and just the basics of what is appropriate for dealing with any product or service. And of course, good industry practice we rely on because we can see some of the providers go above the bare minimum to resolve complaints. Other providers, we need to, you know, push them a little bit towards getting an agreed response or an agreed outcome. And we can do that through providing some case studies and some information, not precedent, but excuse me, but just some good outcomes that we've achieved in the past, where an energy or water company has actually taken all the facts into consideration to actually reach an agreed outcome with their customer. As part of our investigations and even part of our referrals, we also identify, investigate and resolve systemic issues. And these might require procedural or policy change at the providers. They might even require regulatory intervention when a provider has not complied with energy codes, Water Act, whatever it might be. So the point in doing that is we want to actually identify the source of complaints and work with the providers to actually fix that so that future customers don't experience the same issue. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, customers can contact EWON at any time. And in fact, we had about 5,000 customers last year of the 19,500 that came to us before even talking to their energy or water company. Now, some customers do that just because they want to check their facts first. They want to understand their rights. They perhaps want to know about what their responsibilities. And it's a really good education and information process that we provide to them. We can also, through that process, take into account any special needs of their customer to be able to either refer them back to the contact centre or the affordability team if they perhaps need financial assistance, or whether we actually should be doing a warm transfer or use our refer higher level process to get someone from the complaints team at the provider to actually reach out to that customer rather than relying on that customer to contact their provider directly. We, of course, work with many customers who experience vulnerability, affordability perspective, or any other range of vulnerability that's affecting their ability to pay their electricity, gas or water account, or even to navigate through the system of what they're dealing with. So we have particular regard to that. We're not consumer advocates, we're not industry advocates. I mean, we're there to be independent, but we certainly are very good at identifying vulnerability and being able to assist customers navigate their way through a system that can be quite challenging. Customers that are affected by COVID-19, and I guess we all are to some extent, but particularly those whose financial circumstances have changed significantly, we're making sure that they're given priority in our investigations. So we might not just refer them back to the retailer. In actual fact, and I'll talk about Australian Energy Regulator expectations, we know that retailers, energy retailers in particular, are reaching out to their customers, but we also know that there are many more customers facing financial vulnerability for the first time in their lives, and they don't know that there is assistance available to them. So we're making sure that we're the link to that when they reach out to us, to make sure that we can, if we're possible, avoid any debt accumulation and get people on affordable payment arrangements now. For investigations, our focus is on conciliation and negotiation. So we liaise with each party separately, but it's really a shuttle negotiation type process. And in some cases, we will have conference calls with both customers and providers present. But we're there to outline to both parties their respective positions, the strengths and weaknesses of those, in aiming to establish the circumstances of the event or the incident from the perspective of the customer and the provider. And always in my experience, and I've sort of been in the complaints space since about 1991, there's always a different story from a customer and a provider about what's gone right and what's gone wrong. And quite often I see people wanting to label that one's not presenting the facts. In my view, it's really that they both have a set of facts from their own perspective. It's a bit like watching a car accident. Two witnesses will describe it differently, just through the lens of how they saw it. And that's how I see complaints, and that's where many of them actually get ingrained. And so our job is to actually unpack that so that we can actually, establish a base of what's caused the issue and then be able to move forward on that. So we provide advice to both parties about the strengths and weaknesses, and we assist them to reach a just resolution. And it's a particular clause I use often. It's not just a resolution, it's a just resolution. So it's fair to both sides. So let's talk for a moment about those resolutions. Common outcomes, and we always say to a customer when they first raise their complaint with us, what will resolve this for you? And very often the customer's just looking to be acknowledged for the fact that something's not gone right. And particularly when it might be something about their out of pocket, it's about fixing that, but it's also preventing it from happening to somebody else. So the common outcomes that we see are a detailed explanation of what's happened. So getting the provider to actually unpack what happened with their billing, with their meter reading, whatever it might be, and explaining what went wrong. Corrections of errors when they're made, and this can be as simple as the misspelling of somebody's name, which is annoying if that happens, but if you've asked for it to be fixed 4 or 5 times, it becomes very frustrating, right through to someone that's been overbilled. We had a staff meeting yesterday, and our investigations team provided a bit of an overview of 2 or 3 complaints where billing errors were in the quantum of between $10,000 and $20,000 and had built up over a number of years. So I don't think the customers realised the extent of how much overbilled that they'd been, but certainly when we actually got to the bottom of it and were able to have it addressed, they appreciated that we were able to identify it. One went back to 2011, so it was quite significant. Common outcomes also might include refunds, as I mentioned, particularly for overbilling. Goodwill gestures for when there's been really poor customer service and that's really impacted the customer. Compensation for when the customers actually had to spend money to have things addressed themselves. And this could be, from having an electrician coming out, could be from having a plumber coming out and fixing a leak at a water meter that was actually on the water company side of the meter, not the customer's. It could be something less than that. And I mentioned earlier apologies. It really is important that customers receive apologies for when things go wrong. We also look to make sure that in the resolution that there is some action happening for change so that it doesn't happen again. So implementation of a new policy, a process to reduce future complaints, to identify how other customers were affected, providing staff feedback or training. And if we can't get that agreed resolution, then the matter can actually come to me and I can make a binding decision. And if that's the case, then I can also include it in the decision is put a direction that the company actually takes some deep review of their policies and processes for prevention of future complaints. Just need a sip of water, otherwise I'm going to run out of voice. But sometimes we can't achieve an agreed outcome. And in 1920, it was in about 7% of all complaints. When that happens, there's going to be 2 outcomes. Either we're going to make a no further investigation decision, and that's when we find that the company's done as much as they could be expected to do to resolve it, or otherwise I could make a binding decision, and that's when we're of the view that the company hasn't gone far enough, and then I can make a decision that's actually directed at getting the energy or water provider to actually provide redress and fix the problem. So the no further investigation decisions, they are made, I've delegated that responsibility down to our investigation team managers, and our General Manager Dispute Resolution also has input to those decisions. It can happen where there's a fair offer on the table, but the customer hasn't accepted that offer. It could be when we believe the merit of the complaint has been fully investigated and there's no further avenues of inquiry to actually look at. In all of these cases, though, when we make that decision, we provide an assessment report to the customer, which is the basis for making the decision. We provide them with up to 14 days to come back to us with new information, or perhaps with a position that we can further consider. And if they're not able to sway our decision at that point in time, then we finalise the complaint on the no further investigation basis. But we provide the customer with a full report and reasons, and also the right to request an internal review. Those reviews are carried out by our quality team so that they're completely independent of the investigations team. We had 13 reviews in 2019-20. 12 of them were upheld in that the no further investigation decision was agreed with. But in each of those, we identified that we could have communicated that better. We could have provided plain English explanations. We could have perhaps met with the customer and talked through the decision. And so as part of the upholding of the decision, there's generally another discussion with the customer to actually explain our views and our position more broadly. And in one of them, we found that the decision made to finalise the complaint on that basis was completely wrong, that we hadn't fully investigated the matter. It required further investigation. It involved a claim, and as a result, a customer was later compensated for $14,000. So having that internal review is actually critical to the quality of what we should do. And of course, we learned by the fact that we'd actually closed it prematurely. And as I mentioned before, if we find that the customer's position has been upheld, the provider hasn't gone far enough in offering a resolution that's fair and reasonable, then I would make a binding decision. Fortunately, I haven't got to the stage that I've needed to do that since I was appointed in November 14, which means that the conciliation process works well, although sometimes I see complaints that have been dragged on for quite some time. So we can get into that practice of conciliation until we finally get there. I think if we actually called it earlier and I made a binding decision, we might get some faster outcomes for some of those more complex complaints. So that's an ongoing discussion that we have within the office. So if I haven't got any questions so far, and I'm just looking at time too to make sure that we are on time. I think I'm about halfway through my slides, and we
Janine, so sorry. I'm thinking that maybe we launch a few polls. We've got some interactive polls just to see what people know and get their thoughts.
Christina, you are so right. We practiced this so well, and then I forgot about our polls. So thank you.
That's
I'm
all
going to
right.
hand it over to Christine now, and she's going to put 3 questions forward to you. So thank you. Sorry for skipping that important bit.
No, that's all right. So we'll just launch the first one now. So, do you know when you should refer a client to the Energy and Water Ombudsman New South Wales? So, yes, I've referred clients to EWON. The second option is I think so, and the third option is no, I don't. So I hope everyone can see that poll. We'll just leave that up. Oh, so we're getting a lot of I think so's. Okay, that's good. All right, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, so most people have answered I think so. Okay. We'll close that and we'll launch the second one. Okay. So how often do you work with clients who can't pay their energy or water bills? All the time, often, rarely, or I'm not sure. Okay, so we're getting a lot of all the time and often responses. Okay, the majority is often. Okay. Sorry, we're just quickly blitzing through this because I know there's a lot of content to get through. Okay, and the last one is, have your clients experienced difficulty accessing an energy provider's hardship program? Yes, this happens regularly. no, I haven't seen it, sometimes, or not at the moment. Okay, so we're getting a lot of sometimes, and yes, this happens regularly. Okay, there we go. I'll just close that, and Janine, you can continue.
All right, no, thanks, Christine. I might just comment on those results. And I was supposed to throw back to Christine after the acknowledgement of country for those, but better late than never. Thank you. So do you know when you can refer a client to EWON? I think so. Hopefully at the end of this, you'll be a little bit, really at any point in time. My advice always when I'm talking to, people in your roles is I know that you're dealing with customers who are really coming to you with a whole lot of life challenges. So know that we're there and that we're going to provide a good level of support to your clients. If you think that there's other ones that you should focus on more because it's more of a crisis than energy, then you can rely on us to do the energy bit while you actually work on those other ones, and we can work in tandem together. You can, advocate for your customer, or if you're confident that they can work with us directly, we can do that as well. So always sort of, balance the whole thing, and just remember that we certainly will act in their best interests. So how often do you work with clients who can't pay their energy or water bills? All the time and often? Well, yeah, us too. And I'm guessing that you're all expecting that will increase over the next 12 months. We're a bit down on complaints at this point in time because there's a lot of stimulus support out there for them, and the Australian Energy Regulator has put disconnection, debt collection and credit reporting on hold. At some point in time, that's all going to be lifted though, and at that point in time, I think your days are going to get really busy, and I think my office is going to get really busy. So the referral at that point in time will really have to be working hard. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but I know that Vinnie's and I know that the Salvos, they've been hit really hard from a financial perspective and also from a volunteer perspective during COVID. So at the times when we're going to need their assistance so much in coming months, perhaps years, because the recession will take some time, they're going to be a bit down on resources as well. So it's really going to be a bit tough for all of us. And have your clients experience difficulty accessing an energy provider's hardship program, sometimes regularly. That's what we see customers coming to us to, and they haven't got past the contact centre. So we've really been doing some work, and we'll continue to do some work with retailers. The Australian Energy Regulator is doing that similarly to actually make the gateway open to affordability teams. But we'll have to keep ringing that bell, I guess, to say that it's way too hard for too many people. Another thing that's really helpful for the customers, the clients you're dealing with, the customers that come to us, of course, are energy rebates. So we've got a bit of an overview here, and you'll get all the fact sheets. So there's many of them. We haven't listed all of them here, but low income household rebate, family energy rebate, medical energy rebate, life support, the essential medical equipment payment, which comes from Centrelink, and the seniors energy rebate are all important ones, as are the gas ones, which is available to people using natural gas, and also that have the people that have LPG installed within their homes. They can also get a rebate. As well as attached to the webinar information, you're able through this presentation to get links to our fact sheets, which provide all sorts of information about the rebates. I think it's about a 3-page fact sheet, but it covers all of them. It's regularly updated. Service New South Wales, it's really expanded what it's doing, and you and your clients can go online to be able to get assistance from them. They're also distributing EPA, the Energy Account Payment Assistance Program too, either online or at shop fronts, but they're really in that space. And then Services Australia, Centrelink. So there's lots of information there. If you're not aware, I recently went to Service New South Wales, one of their shop fronts, the one closest to me, to renew my licence. I arrived there about lunchtime, really bad decision, queue right outside the door. So if you are referring someone to there, I'd suggest early morning or late afternoon, but not around the lunch break. Medical rebates and support, we've provided you with quite some information there on the amounts. Medical energy rebate, 2 different amounts there depending on the system. So that's there for assisting customers who had to rely on using their heating and cooling in order to keep their body temperature at a regular rate. Life support rebate, the amount varies. Very important that life support customers, so those relying on all those sorts of machines that we've got there, PAP machines, feeding pumps, home dialysis, ventilators, very important that they register with their retailer or network so that they don't get disconnected for any reason. And if there is an unplanned outage, that they have plans in place to be able to keep connectivity of their systems through uninterruptible power support and then being able to get to hospital if necessary. Essential medical equipment payment, which is available via Centrelink, and that's $160 per annum per piece of equipment. So again, it's really of assistance to customers who are eligible. For all those sorts of things, customers do have to get a medical certificate to be able to get the eligibility and to be able to get onto the life support register for their retailer and network company. Energy accounts payment assistance, I spoke about that just a moment ago. It's there in place for customers experiencing short-term financial crisis or emergency. It's $50 vouchers, but there's a maximum of $400 per bill or $800 per year, and that's increased as a result of COVID. In the past, you might have been aware that some EPA providers would provide more than that. There really has been some tightening of EPA now that it's being administered not by Services New South Wales, but by the department, DPI. We're getting quite a few complaints from community workers, firstly because there's a new form that has to be filled out, and it's quite a long form. We're hearing that some clients get halfway through it with their advocate or even themselves, and they're a bit over it by that point in time. So any feedback you can give us or to the Department of DPI, I'm trying to remember what it stands for, Department of Primary Industries, and we'll have it probably in the slideshow somewhere. If you can give them some feedback though about the form, it is, I think, putting a barrier to emergency assistance that is really needed by many customers currently and certainly will be in the future. You can also apply online, as I mentioned before, via Service New South Wales. The customer eligibility will be assessed. We've heard a bit of talk that some outlets, some Service New South Wales outlets, are giving customers advice that it has to be COVID-19 related financial detriment. That's not the case, and we've had DPI addressing that. So if you do hear that, just tell the customer actually to push harder, because it's anyone that qualifies for EPA should be able to get it in today's environment. We talked a bit about life support customers a little bit earlier. I haven't talked about the fact that we have a very comprehensive outreach, community outreach and engagement program. In fact, we had an independent review last year, and the finding was that it's international best practice. We're having to adapt it and doing it virtually, as in today's webinar. We've had some virtual Bring Your Bills days, all sorts of things to keep it going. But one of the things that we learned through our outreach and engagement in 2018, I think it was at a disability expo. A customer came forward and said, you know, it's really hard for people with disability to switch retailers and get the best deal, because if we move house or if we just switch retailers, we have to go back to our doctor. We have to get another medical certificate that says we're entitled to life support assistance. And just having to go to the doctor and do that is really difficult. It can cost us money. We might have to book a taxi, a whole range of things. But it's a barrier to switching retailers and getting the best deal. So we said, actually, that's not good enough. And our policy team did a lot of work about it. And we actually put a proposal to the Australian Energy Market Commission in June this year, saying we think you need to change the rule to make it that one energy retailer can share that medical certificate with another one if the customer is moving house or changing retailers. The rule change application was taken up very quickly by the Australian Energy Market Commission, and in fact they put it out for submissions just a few weeks ago, and they closed on the 3rd of September. So the AEMC is currently considering those submissions, and no doubt will put out a draft finding within the next few weeks about how it will take it forward. But if we can remove that barrier for people with disability, we'll be really pleased. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier about systemic issues and the work that we do on those, and this is really preventative work. So we're trying to make sure that we're not dealing with the same complaints, but more importantly, you're not dealing with the same issues presented by clients, and customers are actually finding it easier to deal with the energy and water systems and markets. So our charter actually requires us to identify systemic issues, whether it's particular to one member or whether it's a group of members. So mostly our investigations team, right from our initial response team through to our detailed investigators, they'll identify something that they are of the view that it's affecting more than one person and causing detriment, and they'll refer it to our policy team. In turn, our policy team raise it with a systemic issue dedicated person at retailers and network companies. We have a bit of trouble sometimes finding that person, but we work very hard to do that, to actually give them the opportunity of reviewing it, confirming with us whether it's systemic or not, and then coming back to us and fixing it. We meet regularly with members to discuss them, particularly when we see something that's really detrimental to consumers, and we want to be able to prevent it. Things such as, if there's a billing system issue, or otherwise if we're seeing faults in default listings and things like that. We report systemic issues involving potential compliance issues through to the regulators, so most often to the Australian Energy Regulator. We report them as potential because in our view it's a compliance issue, but it's up to the regulator at the end of the day to call that and to take action. And it's really good to see that over the last 12 months, I guess, the Australian Energy Regulator has increased its focus on monitoring, reporting and compliance action. So it's good to be in that environment. Just to give you a few examples of the systemic issues that we've identified and then worked through and the impact that they cause. Time of use. So daylight savings time calculation error from metering affected nearly 120,000 customers. And this was residential customers and small business customers. And as a result of us identifying it, over $2 million needed to be returned to customers in billing adjustments. It's still in process, in fact, because we've got to make sure that all affected customers were refunded. And of course, some customers, by the time this was identified, might have changed retailers or may have, moved house. So we've got to actually make sure that the retail company's working through that. We had some customers coming to us when they were reaching out to their retailer looking for some affordability assistance, was simply told that their debt would be waived if they moved to another retailer. So rather than the retailer that they were with that welcomed their customer initially, they were trying to be pushed away. We didn't think that was appropriate and reported it accordingly. We had some retailers putting in barriers to access affordability programs. So once again, as I said to you, getting through the contact centre can be one challenge, but some of the other things we were seeing is that retailers were demanding upfront payments of, say, $500. And if the customer paid that, then they would be put onto an affordability program. Well, obviously the customer couldn't afford to pay that, and perhaps if they could afford to pay it, they wouldn't need the affordability program. So the review of the hardship rule and hardship guideline that the AER carried out last year, there were particular clauses in that to remove those barriers and to prevent retailers from doing that. And the last one's about customers being default listed incorrectly. So as I mentioned, we see a few of those from time to time. A few updates about what's going on in the current environment. I've mentioned the Australian Energy Regulator a few times. So they set the amount of revenue that network businesses can recover from customers via retail billing. So every energy bill has, your service to property charge, that's the network recovery fee, and then they have consumption. The AER also enforces the laws for the national energy market and the gas markets, monitors compliance and reports on the conduct of market participants, protects the interests of household and small business customers by enforcing the national energy law. It set the default market offer that was introduced from the 1st of July last year for small business and residential customers. And that's really the only retail price regulation that's currently in place. And that's there so that, I guess it was there to stop all those really big discount contract offers. sign up to us, you'll get 48% off and 53% off and 29% off. And actually, when you looked at it, some of the prices were inflated to actually, offer what was, sometimes a higher rate than some that were only offering a discount of maybe 12%. So it was really to address that, to set a benchmark for what the price could be, particularly for customers not on a contract. And the AER also takes court action when it identifies that there are compliance issues, and it currently has 7 issues underway, which is a bit of a record for it. So that sort of reflects the place it's established now in compliance and enforcement activity. When COVID first hit us...
So sorry, Janine. So sorry, we just have a few questions just before you move. Yes, so we have one question. Under what circumstances can a retailer refuse to accept a client's application to switch?
There's no circumstances that they can refuse an application to switch. The danger, I guess, if there is a large debt owing, what it means is that the retailer may switch the customer, but then immediately start debt collection action for the debt, because they don't have to provide affordability or hardship program assistance once it's a debt and the customer is switched. But they can't refuse. There can be a time delay because the meter needs to be read, but it's not often I hear that retailers refuse. I'm concerned when I hear that retailers are happy for customers with debt to switch, because it does mean that the customer can't get any affordability assistance for clearing that debt.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for answering that. We have another question. This person has written, I'm a financial counselor. Do energy providers have a responsibility to provide a disability support person to provide assistance to clients contacting their service?
They don't have a responsibility to provide a disability support person. I would expect, though, that, they have their affordability teams. I would expect, though, that, that they would provide some assistance aligned with their customers' needs. So even if it was, to provide the customer with the opportunity of getting an advocate or a support person, but no, they don't have to provide that type of assistance. Really interesting question, though.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. And one last one. We have another question from a Vinnie's member, and it says, often we get clients who can't pay their utility bills. What do I do?
Yeah, that's a really hard one too. I wish I had a wand. We get them as well. What has to happen, and we're going to get on to talking about affordability and what retailers call hardship programs, what I call affordability programs, because I've never met a customer in all my years working in this space that wants to be labelled as requiring hardship support. What they have to do is they have to provide affordable payment plans. At the same time, there's a need to say you don't want a customer accruing debt, so they should be providing consumption, advice about reducing consumption and looking at the broader picture for the customer as well. We have customers that come to us and, when I've been at outreach, I guess the largest accrued debt I've seen has been around $20,000. The customer's never going to be able to pay that off. But, generally if customers are paying something, that will stop retailers from disconnecting. The reason why I'm really an advocate of affordability, that word, is because for many people, energy is not affordable. And ideally what would happen is retailers would get in early before people accrue debt. But we all know, and particularly through your work, that many people have a lot of debt there already. So working with retailers to actually put that aside, get people being able to perhaps reduce consumption and pay their current bill, and then maybe making small inroads, doing some debt waiver. There's some good things. That's the best industry practice that we see. But probably not as much of that as we saw in the past. And I guess my fear, and many of you probably too, is that through COVID we'll see more of this. So we might get on to talking about that issue a little bit more, and I'll get your thoughts, get some more feedback from you, because we'll ask another polling question. With COVID, though, AER jumped in very quickly and said, all right, all retailers must offer all households and small business in financial stress a payment plan on request. As I mentioned before, not disconnect, not debt collect, not default list. And for businesses that need to actually close down, to waive disconnection, reconnection or contract break fees. So that went in place until the 31st of July. In late July, they extended it. It's virtually still in place until the 31st of October. But customers now need to reach out to their retailers. So retailers need to make sure that they're reaching out to customers equally. So if you have experience that retailers are not adhering to those AER expectations, please refer that customer to us. Advocate for them if you like, but we have a relationship with the AER where we are identifying those complaints and reporting them immediately to the provider, but also getting onto the AER as well. Another thing that customers can do, and it's a bit important at this point in time too, is they can provide a self-read. So for some time during COVID, there were many more estimated reads because meters weren't being read because of COVID restrictions. I think most network companies and meter readers are working again now, but customers might be receiving, particularly small business, an estimation based on last year when their business was open, whereas this year, from April through to probably mid-May, early June, they might not have been open. So reading your own meter, getting that read, sending either a photo of it or ringing through to your retailer will get your bill adjusted. And if it's a high estimated bill, that will provide immediate support. Flexible payment options, and this goes back to the question that we're asked about affordable payment plans. So customers can request a payment plan that can't be denied. And they really need to share how much they can afford. Now, you know, as we know, that many customers, in response to a question from a retailer, can you afford to pay $100 a fortnight? Customers will say yes, because they don't think they have a choice. And actually, they can't afford to pay $100 a fortnight. So the importance of sharing how much they can afford is critical. The retailer will assess the amount owing. They'll estimate the next 12 months' bills, and they'll say, listen, you need to pay this amount to cover off your consumption. If it's not going to meet that, and it can be really hard depending on where you live, then identifying some ways to reduce consumption is really critical too. But as I mentioned before, I know there's always going to be some gaps. If the payment plan is not affordable, then you or the customer should really let the retailer know, because otherwise they're going to have a failed payment plan, and 2 failed payment plans means that you can be disconnected. So paying something to stop that is really critical. Affordability programs, as I said, two payment plans each year, and customers should again contact their retailer if they cannot meet agreed arrangements. It's really critical to keep in touch. So I'll go through this slide and then we'll ask the next question. The AER established a hardship guideline in 2019, and retailers were required to submit their new programs by October 19. All providers must maintain the AER approved affordability programs for low income and vulnerable customers. They must promote those programs and the charter on their website, and customers must be referred to their affordability program as soon as the retailer identifies a customer in financial or other difficulties. So my view, what's in a word? As I mentioned earlier, hardship, I think it's very much a stigma carrying word, and I don't think any customer wants to stand up, put their hand up and say I'm in hardship. And I think that will emerge even more with customers that are out of work or have reduced hours because of COVID. Affordability, on the other hand, reflects the fact that for some customers, the price of energy is not affordable. So it's really about the price, it's not the customer's circumstances. And the question that I was asked earlier really is about that as well. So Christina has another polling question for you, and I'm really interested in the results of this one.
Yes, I do. So we'll go ahead and launch this question. This poll, sorry. Which wording do you think clients would prefer when they are referred to an assistance program? Hardship program or the affordability program? And once we get those responses, I'll see if I can actually share that. Okay, so I'm going to actually close this poll now and share. So most of you have actually chosen the affordability program. Okay.
what was that, about 80 something percent?
Yes, that was 86%.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that. The AER, in its work on the hardship guideline last year, did say to retailers, they took on board our submissions and they said you can use the affordability word or other language, but no one's really taken it up. So I'm going to keep pushing the barrow. So high bill complaints, and I'm conscious of time. We've got about 8 minutes left and we need to finish right on time. Lots of underlying causes: back billing, high consumption, meter access, incorrect tariffs, wrong meter installation, cross wiring. I guess they're the technical terms. They're the things that we see going wrong that cause it. But the thing we see most often, and I think you see most often, is the other reason: the cost of energy, household appliances, low fixed incomes and consumption. So interestingly, during COVID, with the fact that JobKeeper and JobSeeker was increased, so from the very low amount it used to be, we're seeing people actually paying electricity bills and being able to afford their electricity where they couldn't do that in the past. And they're also being able to afford dinner as well. Whereas before it was, if I pay electricity, I don't eat, maybe the kids do. And I think ACOS are seeing that, and they've done some research in that space. So using appliances during peak periods when energy cost is higher, if that can be avoided, then that will get your bill down. Likewise, having air conditioning and heating on at the right times, having windows and doors closed rather than open, and having air conditioning set at about 26 degrees and heating set at about 21 degrees. They're the optimum ones for comfort and for getting a lower bill. Of course, the age or the type of appliance affects your energy bill as well. And those people that need assistance generally have older appliances and they're not as energy efficient. So oil-filled column heaters use heaps of electricity, fridges or freezers with faulty seals, and the worst thing is generally the beer fridge. It's a good old Aussie thing that we have in our garage, but usually it's an old fridge, and usually when it's turned on, it's going all the time. Faulty appliances, if a thermostat's not working, high consumption, tenants are especially vulnerable in some of these factors, and they don't have the money they can't upgrade the appliances that are fixed, and they don't have the money to buy, the higher cost, low consumption ones. So I guess all of that is my reason for saying for many people energy is not affordable. And we keep working on that with all the different agencies and stakeholders that we can. I guess when referring a client to EWON, any time that you think that there could be a problem with the bill, then just assume that there is. I mentioned that back bill before that ended up seeing $2 million worth of refunds. Many customers didn't pick that up, and wasn't huge refunds for everyone, but some of them got significant money back. So if you think something's wrong, it might be. If the customer's been disconnected or threatened with disconnection, we can get customers reconnected same day and make sure that as part of that, they're on an affordable payment plan. If it's problems with connection or supply, likewise, we can get that fixed pretty quickly. If you feel the retailer's not assisting a customer as being overly harsh, we can address that. If they're putting in barriers to affordability programs, so those lump sums or pay 2 fortnights or whatever it might be, if they're giving incorrect information, if they're refusing to negotiate, they are all barriers that we can break down, and more to the point, we can look at the compliance issues behind them. In closing, getting customers onto the best energy deal is really critical as well, because there can be a lot of difference between one retailer and the next. The best places to go are the Australian Energy Regulator's Energy Made Easy. They keep spending money on updating this. Picking the right energy plan is complex. You've got to spend some time, you've got to be patient. It's a challenge, but you can work through that and help a client or see if they've got a family member that can help them. Service New South Wales, again, they have an energy switch, so they can help you find the better product, the better contract, but then you have to actually initiate the discussion with the retailer. My comment in red down the bottom is beware the meerkats. So that's based on that ad that you see. They're very cute, but I select, compare the market, find a choosy, whoever they are only offering products from the retailers that are paying them a commission. So your clients could miss their best deal, whereas if you go to Energy Made Easy or Service New South Wales Energy Switch, you'll get all the retailers and what they're offering. Another bit of advice I'd provide is just through market share, and I'm not saying that these are better retailers than other retailers, it's not my role to do that. But Origin Energy, AGL and Energy Australia have, 80% of the market. Their affordability programs are stronger than the second tier, just purely by their size. So if a client's getting a lower price deal, but then they're not going to get the better quality affordability program, then it might not be the best deal for them. Our events, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to do everything virtually. If for your organisation you want to work with us on a Bring Your Bills Day or have us do a webinar for your organisation, you've got all the contact information for us to be able to do that. And we've provided you with other useful links there so that you can get that information yourself as well. There's our contact information so that you can keep in touch with us. I hope you found this really interesting, and I know we've only got 2 minutes left, so I'll hand over to Christine just to see whether there's any more questions. If you have others, you can just contact us and we'll be able to provide your advice anyway, and I'll let Christina do the close as well. So thanks for your time today, really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Janine. That was very, very useful and insightful. We just have a few more questions and comments which we want to, which we'll try to go through quickly. We've got a question here. It says, the assessment questionnaire for EAPA application is quite tedious to accomplish. There's a need to revamp this. Will this be revamped?
We've chatted with Depot, the department, about that. I'd like feedback. So I was part of an ATSI Connection roundtable a few weeks ago, and I said to them, look, can you just, if you can email us and just give us feedback, we'll go back to the department. But we really do need people who are working with clients, so community workers, financial counsellors. We need you to stamp your feet. So look, I agree. I think it's a barrier. I think it's like a barrier to an affordability program. I think it's a barrier to the assistance. So I know there should be eligibility criteria, but I think they've gone too far. So if you let us know, we'll stamp our feet, but please stamp your feet. We need to do it.
Great, thank you. And we've just got a comment that from a participant that says, just a note on affordability. We often say to clients that they should be put on an affordability payment plan, not just a payment plan. So those are the terms that they use.
Yeah, and I really encourage you using that. It's got to be affordable. Yeah.
That's right. And we just have another comment from a participant asking about the slides. Yes, we will be sending the slides in the email that we send to all participants in the end. All right, so those are all the questions and comments. We don't have time to go through all 3 of the final polls that we had, but I think we might just do one final one. So can you more confidently provide energy affordability assistance to your clients or refer them to EWON after this webinar? Okay, I will just share the answer for that. Okay, so 100%, everyone said yes. That's really great to hear.
Thank you.
That sounds great. Okay. All right. So just as I mentioned at the beginning, after this webinar ends, you will get a survey, and we appreciate your feedback, especially if you have any ideas about future topics you'd like us to present on. That would be really great. As I said, about an hour after we end the webinar, you will receive an email with the links to the resources and the websites that we've discussed today, as well as the slides. If you're watching this as a recorded webinar and you have any questions or you would like any resources to be sent to you, please email cle@legalaid.nsw.gov.au. Just make sure you include the name of the webinar you've been watching, and we can send you all that information. All right, and thank you so much, Janine, for today. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Bye now.